Must have shut the Kindle off at some point. I gotta turn it back on.
You're just an abomination of problems.
That's pretty harsh, actually.
Kind of.
That's entirely too harsh of a comment. Man.
And I'm all coffee today.
Like the drink?
And coffee and gaggy.
Coffee and gaggy.
I have a phlegm issue.
All right, so I'm watching it, and I go, "Hey, Kimbo, what's up?" Go to share, but it only wants to start a watch party.
Huh.
Just write post.
Huh.
Oh, there it is.
Do you see it now?
Okay, we'll see if that worked.
Yeah, I'll try to share it on mine too.
I still don't have a option to see chat, so I don't know how that was going to work.
I just realized I forgot to start Reaper.
No, that's all right. Good now, though? Oh, boy, I'd have been angry. Oh, boy.
Well, after the conundrum that we've had the past couple hours.
That was terrible.
Like, seriously? Ridiculous. Streaming should not be this hard.
Can I turn my phone sideways?
I accidentally clicked our thing off. Our music.
Yeah, that sucks. The music's good. What?
The little video.
You clicked it off?
I didn't mean to, but it did.
Oh, how do we know we're going to end? It'll be forever. We don't know where we are. It'll be forever. Why are you laughing? This is a terrible turn of events.
Oh my God. It's a conundrum.
Are we recording in Reaper?
Yeah.
All right. What? Why are you laughing? You're still laughing. This is terrible.
I'm delirious at this point. We've had a bad past couple hours, you guys, trying to.
Oh, we don't even know what's going on.
Streaming.
Oh, Jake even said, "Great, now there's no music."
You should hear the music.
Can you hear music, Jake? I can hear music.
I don't know.
Are we just sitting here in silence for everybody?
No, I'm trying to share. I'm trying to share it. There, we should be good. It should.
Daryl can hear it. Jake, you're a liar.
You're a liar, Jake.
Hey, Trista. Jake says no. No music.
Great. Now there's no music. Jake, let me tell you about the past couple hours we've had here. Shame on you, Jake. The anonymous Supernatural Tendencies podcast poster.
Yeah.
What did we decide that his name was?
Medieval moderator.
The medieval moderator.
Brittany doesn't hear it either. Oh man. Oh, I know why. It's the internet connection going to Indiana.
It's gotta be it. Yeah, that's probably what it is.
No way that's not the issue.
Well, we can click it off there if you want to. I can.
Well, how do we know where to begin now?
There it goes.
There goes what?
Up on the screen. Yeah, Brittany says no music. Kelly says she can hear it, but it's just way low.
Way low, huh?
What the actual bleep?
Kelly Scott?
I'm not going to swear on today's podcast. I'm not going to swear on today's podcast.
Is that the Kelly Scott I think it is?
Yeah. Kelly, dark-haired Kelly?
The one I used to work at Spencer's with, Kelly?
Yeah.
Hey, Kelly, how you doing?
Kelly's like, well, now that you've described me and, named off my places of employment.
Kelly Scott, whose social security number is blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I haven't talked to her in a while. How you doing, Kelly? I miss your face.
See, Trista could hear it too. What the bleep and bleep?
Oh, my
I'm going to
gosh.
get one of those. I'm going to do that. No, see, here's the what up, you guys. Because why is it still posting up there?
Well, first off, this is the official start, right?
Yeah, this is the official
First
start.
off, welcome this week again to the Supernatural Tendencies podcast.
This, but it's like not letting me delete it. There it goes.
Thank you for joining us for the Supernatural Tendencies podcast. We had a few issues today. The audio listeners will not understand how late we're recording. We actually finished recording the first part of this podcast by what, 1:30?
Yeah.
Something like that. Went smooth. Man, our voices sound silky, lovely smoothness. And then as soon as we go to record or do the live for this, you had decided to let our StreamYard subscription lapse.
Well, because we were having some issues with the audio, and I've heard so much good. I'm not even going to say their name, but we've heard so much.
Two-part problem you have.
Yeah.
Okay,
we've been having this audio issue with with StreamYard. Otherwise, we absolutely love StreamYard. So it was coming up for renewal on the 24th. And I was like, you know what? I've heard awesome things about this other, I don't want to call it app.
Streaming platform?
Streaming platform. And I thought, well, it's even cheaper because StreamYard's kind of expensive. It's $50 a month for it, just to be able to stream live and do all the fancy dancy things we do. So we tried this other one here this morning. That was the plan. And literally for 4 hours now, we have just been going through hell with it. It would not work. It would not give us a signal. All of this. I was in chat with their customer service, and I use that term lightly. Yeah. So we ended up basically saying, I want a refund and going back to StreamYard.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, part 2 of our possible issue with StreamYard is we're not trying to give out our future plans too early, but we're kind of throwing around the idea of, let me bring this down, of possibly adding some hosts on. And the initial thought that we had, the initial issue that we thought we had, was that we thought StreamYard was only allowing, I cannot talk, only allowing two simultaneous cameras to be going. After literally a 2-second search, we found that it will allow 6 and then 10 in the broadcast studio altogether to be switched out on the live feed.
Which is not what they say on their website.
But we tested it, and we could do at least 3. So I imagine it could do 4 if it says 6. So now StreamYard does everything else properly for us, except for last week. If any of you tuned into last week's live, for some reason my mic didn't pick up, and it's this elaborate setup that I won't go into explanation. But for some reason, without us changing any settings, it wasn't picking up this microphone. It was picking up from her microphone, so it was like in a roundabout way, just getting my room voice, and not doing actually my direct recording. So hopefully today I sound better. I sound like I'm not yelling from the other side of the room. So at that junction, puncture, I don't know what I'm saying. We're back now with StreamYard. So now 4 hours later, we're actually doing the live. So with that very elongated piece of peek behind the curtain, rather, do you want to start today's show?
Go ahead, because it's your script.
Oh, okay. All right. Today we're going to be covering the Cash Landrum UFO incident. I would say that I think a few other podcasts have done this, but not a lot of the big ones.
It's a pretty well-known case, though.
And it is so much so that it was on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. So if any of our scripts that we do research for, that I do research for, that allows me and makes me watch Unsolved Mysteries, I'm totally fine for that. So if you guys get the chance, I believe it was season 3, episode 4, which came out in like 1990 or 1991. This case was featured, which we actually cited in our citations there.
Did you see Jake?
No, what'd Jake say?
Jake.
Yeah. So she said, can you post that?
Terrible. I was trying it. It was like,
oh, there we go. Sounds like Christy sabotaged your microphone in a power move to attempt to be sole host. Probably, but unfortunately, I'm the one that mainly talks, so she can actually kind of half-see comments. So sometimes, and this is kind of like, again, a further peek behind the curtain, is why we're trying to come up with maybe some other hosts, is to get some more people to bounce ideas off of the way it is. Because if not, I just like look at her, and then she goes, she's like this, and then she goes, What?
What
was that?
Are we doing a podcast?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was
Besides looking, that, Jake.
I was looking at Tristan's post.
Jake, you know me.
Jake, we got to see Jake last weekend.
I would not sabotage his microphone. I would just beat the piss out of him underneath the desk.
She can't run faster than me, though.
Okay.
She can't run faster than me. So
I don't run.
So, Cash Landrum incident. Let's go ahead and start off where we were in the script. What's fantastic about the Cash Landrum UFO incident is, and a lot of times the way I started off this week's script was that most people's encounters with UFOs are just that. They're just unidentified flying objects. And that could mean, and this is not to get into the nitty-gritty of technicality of what that means, but if you happen to see a bird that doesn't appear to be a bird, but it turns out to be a bird, we have a truck going by. That's fantastic to hear. And you don't identify it as a bird. Technically, a bird could be a UFO until it is identified as such. So if we move on, that's the stupid ins and outs of technicality, and go into objects that are glowing orbs in the sky that could be airplanes until they maneuver in fashions and at speeds that couldn't be an airplane. That is what most people see in UFO sightings. It isn't exactly the most exciting. kind of sighting. While intriguing, it's not one that makes you go, ooh, you know, it doesn't make you shiver or anything, right?
Although there are some particularly disturbing things with this case that
this one
allegedly happened after.
Let me get into. I was just kind of like funneling down into why this case is in the echelon of other cases that are actually kind of spine tingling, and the fact that, like I said, most people see these, you know, these orbs of light, and maybe they go around each other, and it's kind of creepy, but it's not like a Travis Walton case, where you get abducted, or you see a literal shape, you hear a hum or something like that. So we're getting into the series of cases that not only affect someone's mentality and make them question about whether or not there is extraterrestrial life in the universe, but in this case, you have a visual that is very detailed. You have a visual that is more than just a glowing orb, and it's obviously not a craft that we as humans actively use. It's not a structure, shape of a ship that we commonly use. Now, we want to make sure that we specify that sometimes people consider the SR-22 possibly the some of the UFO sightings as a cause or solution, however you want to say that. The SR-22 being the Black Hawk. I hope I got the numbers right. My head isn't on straight today. Anyway, it's getting hot in here by the second. It's killing me. So the Black Hawk was the proprietary, radar reflecting, aircraft being developed. And so a lot of people think that when they were doing these tests, maybe people saw these SR-22s at low altitudes, and that would be what they would consider something of an alien craft, because it looked vastly different from many other aircraft at the time. This is, again, past that. We still don't have any recognition of what this craft could be. So with that long-winded explanation,
I damn near fell asleep.
I'm sorry. That's why you leave me here. I don't have anybody else to talk with.
There's Petey.
You literally look
Oscar.
at this. I look over the monitors, and you're literally going.
Well, I'm looking at the comments.
Oh wait, and then there's this. Then there's this.
Whatever.
There's this gem.
Whatever.
And then one of these. And then we have. Oh, you got to get a napkin and get. And everybody who's watching knows what I'm talking about. Anyway,
I don't like you.
All right, let's get into this. 9 p.m. and I don't have a date in the script. Did you let me do the script and not have it a starting date?
1980.
Was it 1980? I didn't write that in the first part of the script.
I'm pretty sure it was 1980.
We have 1980 at 9 p.m. in Dayton, Texas, which lies about 20 miles. No, just north. We don't have specific. I work on too many scripts. Dayton, Texas, just north of Houston. Betty Cash, Vicky Landrum, and Vicky's 7-year-old grandson Colby will be driving down. I don't call it a desolate road, but it is kind of a back road, two-lane highway, surrounded on both sides, guarded on both sides by trees. Rather uneventful car ride until they happen upon a floating object in the sky just above the road. So they approach the object, which they describe as being diamond-shaped. Now, when I initially saw this or heard the shape of the craft, I'm thinking a diamond that's on its side. Right. So you stop and you look up, and it's just like a diamond shape in the sky. Mm-hmm. But no, thank you for putting the picture up. Yeah. This is definitely like a upright diamond. Right. And all the sides, and this rendition here on the screen. Sorry for the audio listeners here. How can you describe that for the audio listeners? It's almost like two pyramids stacked base on base.
Base on base.
Right.
Yeah.
Floating in the air. So if you took one pyramid side up, took another pyramid, flipped it upside down, and put it on the base of the top pyramid. That's kind of what this looks like. They had said that the sides of it were more rounded, and this depiction here makes it like more sharp. But all the sides were more rounded, but definitely the bottom of the pyramid was rounded, and they know that because not only was it rounded, but flames were visibly shooting out of it. Now, what's actually crazy about this is when they approached it, they could feel the heat rising in the car, right? As they continue near it, heat's starting to rise. And for some reason, Betty Cash just keeps driving.
Yeah,
she just keeps coming toward it, right? So and we're not going to go as far as to say she was hypnotized, but man, she wanted to get close to it, to the point that Vicky Landrum would shout at her to stop the car. So then Betty obviously crammed on the brakes, just screeched into a halt, which threw Vicky forward in the car. Obviously, it's 1980. No one gives a crap about seatbelts. So she goes flying forward in the car and has to brace herself against the dash. Well, apparently the heat was so intense that she left handprints in the dash. Now, what we don't have, and I've multiple sources that I've cited, multiple videos that I've watched, the handprints that they're talking about, I don't know if literally went and like molded into the dash. Are we talking like sweat handprints? Because God, I have sweaty palms. I leave prints everywhere.
I have seen where the grandson, who was 7 years old at the time, around in there, where he's an adult now, and he's given interviews and talked about it, and he even talks about. I think he said though that it was her in the steering wheel, not actually in the dash, but it was in the steering wheel.
Well, no, because it was Vicky Landrum that got forced forward.
Oh, okay.
Because Betty Cash was driving.
He said steering wheel.
Okay, now unless he's telling the story different, every other report that I have read on both written and on video says that while Betty Cash was in control of the car, thus holding the steering wheel, she slammed on the brakes, throwing Vicky Landrum in the passenger side forward. Yeah, and she went to brace herself on the dash. So regardless, she left some type of indentation.
They were indentions, actually. Okay. Yeah, it wasn't just like fingerprints, you know.
So the heat was at a point to actually, I don't know if it was plastic in the 80s or what.
Yeah, whatever component.
Her hand started to mold into the dash. So now we're stopped. And of all the people in the car, Betty decides to have a great amount of courage, stupidity, because we all know there's a fine line between the two.
Yeah.
And already this blistering heat to make one's hands go into a dash. She gets out of the car and decides to get a closer look. And again, as she's moving forward towards the object to get a better look, the heat is just rising and rising and rising, which makes total sense if whatever object this is or its origins, if it's shooting flames out of the bottom of it, it's not going to be a freezer below it.
Yeah.
So she keeps trying to approach it, and she would go on to describe the heat as cooking her from the inside out. Which, regardless of whatever happens from here on out, just heat would probably make you feel that way.
Yeah.
Right? So she's sitting there, and she's looking at it, and she knows there's lights kind of coming around it on all sides, and it's just floating there. Right? So by this point, again, hero Vicky Landrum yells at her, "Let's get the hell out of here." Right?
Yeah.
Because maybe some type of combination of fear and intrigue just made her just freeze in the spot, that being Betty Cash. So Betty Cash would hear Vicky yell at her, "Let's get out of here," and she would slowly turn and start to go back. And without even thinking about it, she reached for the handle of the car, and the car wouldn't be immune to this heat either. And she would actually scald her hand.
That would be hot.
Yeah, on the metal, I'm assuming just flat out metal of a car from 1980. And she would have to use her coat to kind of like open it up and get back inside. So as they're inside, they still don't quite leave yet. And the object starts to, rise. I think they were about 130 feet from it, and it begins to slowly rise above the tree line. Soon after that, multiple helicopters come flying over, spotlights blaring, right? And if it were one or two helicopters, like that'd be impressive enough.
Yeah.
But we word it here in the script as being 23 to 26 helicopters.
That's a lot of helicopters.
Now, in some of the written reports I have read, there was a disparagement between whether or not it was 23 or 26. If you watch the Unsolved Mysteries episode, Vicky Landrum says she counted 23, but then Colby says, "Oh, there's one more." Or 22, and then Colby says, "Oh, there's one more," making it 23. So if we're going to go with what the eyewitness says from that episode, she says there's 23. So we're not quite sure from there with, like I said, with the confliction of the written reports afterwards, as well as the episode from Vicky Landrum herself. So eventually they leave. Now, I say they just leave without getting any detail because I don't know if they all raised up out of the sky or if they all flew off in a horizontal direction. That's not really specified.
Yeah.
But regardless, they go away. Okay? So obviously there's nothing to look at anymore. The three go back home, and that night, within 6 hours, they all start feeling ill. All three of them. First, Vicky would be in her, I'm assuming, night clothes or whatever, gets up in the middle of the night and vomits. She doesn't feel well, nausea, headache, she vomits. And then I'm assuming soon after, Colby wakes up yelling for some water. So she goes in and notices that he too has vomited all over his bed. And then also he's just burning up hot. So something is affecting both Vicky and Colby. The next morning, I believe it was, Vicky would go to Betty Cash's house. Maybe it was a couple days later because Betty hasn't responded to any of her phone calls or anything like that. She would go over and find Betty Cash in a much worse state than either herself or Colby. She would go into her house, which I believe Betty Cash would still be in bed, covered in blisters. She would, what else was there? Again, nausea, headaches. She would feel sick. She would also request water like Colby had. So Betty Cash would go on in this condition, deteriorating until January 1st. And January 1st, she'd be at the point that she couldn't do that any longer, and she'd have to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
So upon going to the hospital, which is actually fantastic about this case, again, with all the written reports and in that episode from Unsolved Mysteries, they actually had the doctor who initially started treating her, and that would be Dr. Brian McClellan, I believe from a Houston hospital.
Imagine.
I think it was like a suburb of Houston, and I don't know that right offhand, but regardless, he would go on to start treating her for acute radiation poisoning, and he's devoutly sure that what she was experiencing was high doses of radiation. He put it akin to if you were about 3 to 4 miles from the epicenter of Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
crazy.
I would assume that's quite a bit. I think, here's a side note. I think ultimately, we've seen maybe pictures, maybe videos of atomic testing, maybe even of the Hiroshima blast itself. But without actually being there, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to be there, we could say, wow, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But like, we really don't know ourselves how crazy that really is.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one thing I want to mention because I think it's going to come back up a little later, right? Being 3 to 4 miles from the epicenter from a huge mushroom cloud that absolutely decimated Hiroshima. So let's move on. After Betty's release from the hospital, they all still started experiencing these things. The nausea, the headaches, and everything else.
And they're getting worse.
Only Betty Cash's is getting worse. Yep. Vicky and Colby will slowly start to get better, but they will still experience, at least in part, some of these side effects for the rest of their lives. Betty Cash would go on to contact, and I can never say his name, John Schuessler. Schuessler. Scheussel. That name is just terrible for my tongue. John Schuessler. It would work for an unnamed aeronautic engineering firm and also happened to be a MUFON investigator. He would immediately come to Texas and start investigating what had happened, taking all 3 of them back to where the sighting occurred. Now, the first thing that he noticed, and this should be at the top of any investigator's list, is the sincerity and the conciseness. How concise they were. Is that a word? Conciseness? What is that?
I don't even know.
In that tense, how do you say concise? I don't know. Screw it. So how concise and honest they were, seemingly, with their recitation of what had happened. Next would be the visible scorch marks on the pavement from where they had said the object was kind of hovering. And obviously the stream, the jet, the cascading flames from the bottom obviously left marks on the pavement. So he said they were clearly visible from the naked eye. And I believe there was at least 1 or 2 pictures of it beforehand. And I say beforehand because then a couple weeks later, he would come back to check the spot and they wouldn't be there. And he would actually get eyewitness testimony saying that after they had done the initial investigation, sometime after the sighting happened, obviously also after Schuessler had initially came there, that unmarked trucks would come in, dig up the asphalt, replace it with new asphalt, and haul away what was left. So for some reason, somebody thought it pertinent to come out and replace the asphalt. So that was gone. But I think he had documented beforehand. Even so, it being clearly seen without any type of aerial photograph or anything, you could clearly see these scorch marks on the pavement. So that's where I was in the script. Now I lost my place. So Schuessler would carry on and not only interview the 3, but then he would go down the entirety of the houses on either side of the road for 10 miles and interview everybody that lived along that stretch of road for 10 miles. In that 10 miles, he had 10 other people attest that they had seen something in the sky. They couldn't exactly describe what it was, but there was an object in the sky. 7 of those 10 people interviewed also witnessed the helicopters. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
You have anything to say?
No.
Nothing yet.
No.
I feel like I'm just talking.
I want to. I keep wanting to be like,
I know, I see it.
but I know you're going to be like, not yet.
No.
Shut up.
No, this is the time.
Shut up.
Do you have something you want to add in?
Well, I think just the fact that, and we're going to get into it later. See, that's why I don't want to say anything just yet.
Go ahead. Well, if you have thoughts, go ahead.
Well, just, the believability of them.
Okay.
You have Betty Cash having this radiation poisoning. It's extreme radiation poisoning. Like, okay, so that's That's number one.
Yeah.
But then you have 7 other people not with Betty Cash or Vicky Landrum, separate from this.
The residents that he interviewed?
Yeah, who also witnessed seeing this craft and the helicopters. So I think, again, there's number 2. As far as believability. Believability.
Corroborating evidence is a big thing. I mean, especially if people don't, depending on how far they were away from their homes. I mean, as long as you're not like, I don't even want to say this because it sounds accusatory, but like buddy neighbors who may look out for each other.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think this is the case because you have 10 miles and they were, I don't know how, I don't think they were that far from their house, but I don't think they were like miles and miles and miles away.
Yeah.
But people who relatively don't know much of each other, corroborating the same story that have no real gains to be had.
Yeah. So that's kind of a ding ding there.
Being an ancillary report. Yeah, that's understandable. Excuse me. So of one of those 7 people that had seen craft was Detective Sergeant L.L. Walker, which, by the way, is a fantastic name.
It is.
I don't know if we have many people like that anymore that don't use this technique for just pen names, but having 2 initials and then your last name just sounds prestigious, does it not? Like, I don't know why people just don't do that more. But Detective Sergeant L.L. Walker would be a police officer. I'm not sure if he was retired at the time or if it was when he was in active duty, but at the time they had seen it, he was not working. So regardless of whether or not he was retired or not, he wasn't on duty when he also seen the helicopters, and he would be certain they were military helicopters. So Betty and Vicky would not be content with just letting this go. They wanted to bring it to someone's attention. So they would actually write 2 Texas congressmen, and they actually named them in the Unsolved Mysteries episode. So if you want to know their actual names, go ahead and check it out. I will not repeat them here just because I didn't put them in. I felt it was too closely mirroring. But they did write 2 Texas congressmen. They received a reply that the nearby Bergstrom Air Force Base there in Texas would be notified of the incident. August of 1981, Vicky and Betty would be invited. Soda pop, to come to Bergstrom to go over what happened with them on that hunting night. So the Air Force would get back with them, say, "Hey, why don't you come in and tell us what happened?" And this is where we start the ball rolling on an interesting, not an aside, but different path that this story is going to take. Both Vicky and Betty would say that upon entering the room that they were going to be interviewed in, they noticed a big map. And on the map was a pin exactly where the sighting took place. Now, they also had a stenographer, a military stenographer, taking notes of the entire interview. The interview lasted for more than 2 hours, where they were asked about specifics of the incident, the overall explanation of the side effects they sustained after the incident, and what else was there?
What they wanted.
And they also requested her to remove her wig.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Because by this point, Betty Cash would be losing her hair. Starting off in patches,
which you can see here in the picture.
Oh, yep, right there. Yep,
that up there,
yep.
yes.
Starting off in patches and growing more and more and more. Not exactly bald, but a considerable amount of hair being lost.
That would be devastating.
Yes, it would be. The interviewers would then ask how they knew the helicopters were military ones, and they would Betty Cash, Vicky Landrum would say that they knew they were military because they seen the words United States Air Force printed on the sides of the helicopters. The military interviewers would go on to say that they don't have any indication that there were any type of military activities going on in the area. Even more so, the Air Force. So then they asked the witnesses what they felt that the Air Force needed to do. What were they asking? What were they there for?
What do you want us to do?
What do they want them to do about it? And Betty Cash requested that the Air Force help with medical bills because they felt the Air Force, being, if it was an Air Force vehicle or vehicles, they were partially responsible. So I'm confused at this time as to whether or not Cash and Landrum believe this object to be a military vehicle itself.
That's what I was kind of wondering.
Or
like
do they
test?
Yeah,
some kind of test craft.
Yeah. Or did they actually think that it was a UFO? So if you think it was a UFO, then I don't see how you would have logically.
Yeah, how can you blame the military? How can you blame them?
That's like
if they're just trying to pursue this craft.
That's like trying to sue Parks and Recreation because you get mauled by a bear.
Kind of. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So So, and it's not explicitly said what their mentality was about the craft.
Yeah.
Which is, I find it very, very interesting. So at this point, do all three witnesses think they're just seeing an experimental test craft that they got that was
Radiation
being
fallout from
this object that wasn't supposed to be being tested there? It's not a proper testing spot. So then now they're liable for it. Regardless, the interviewers would say that they didn't think that the Air Force was responsible for the damages, but they would inquire or tell them, not inquire, they would tell them to fill out a claim, and then it would be reviewed, and then they would get back with them. Of course, as you might think, 4 weeks later, they got the answer back with a big fat no.
Zilch, nothing.
Claims were denied. So both Vetty and Vicky, not wanting to let this die, filed a lawsuit in 1982 to the U.S. Air Force. A suit was automatically dismissed by a federal judge. Wouldn't even see him due to lack of evidence. With no further avenues, they kind of felt deflated. So what to do now? And their only real option was just
what are you going to do?
To let it go.
Yeah.
I mean,
they didn't have any other choice.
They've done all that they could during a legal process. Hey, Dad, how's it going? We're actually late to go eat dinner with him, so I'm sorry. Technical issues the most of the day. So they carry on with their lives, and there's not much more you can do. So, and what we have now at this point, let me see here. Betty would go on to be hospitalized at least once a year for the rest of her life, sometimes more. She would acquire multiple types of cancer, as well as both Vicky and Colby would have reduced white blood cell counts and weakened immune systems, and Vicky would go on to lose her sight before her death in 2007. All claimed to be side effects of radiation exposure.
Yeah.
Now, I take a pause because we believe in the paranormal and we believe in the extraterrestrial. We do believe in all the things that we cover in part or in whole, pending. Now, we are individuals and we do have varying opinions on whether or not we believe a certain story more than the other, or maybe even we differ on our opinions as to what's causing the particular topic. Maybe you believe it's more spiritual, maybe I think it's more magical. Who knows, right? But in this case, we can't let this case go without coming up with some counterpoints. Yeah, I couldn't anyway.
You have to look at all the angles.
Yes,
all
you do.
The evidence, if you will.
And this one has some pretty damning evidence for some of it having to do with this case. Skeptoid.com had an author in 2018 named Brian Dunning who would write a piece about this. And he would really get into the nitty-gritty as to the counter arguments to everything that had happened. So if you get a chance to go over to Skeptoid, look up the Brian Dunning article for the Cash Landrum incident. And it is very enlightening. Okay, first, and we gotta say it, right? I don't want to make any guesses as to their age when this happens, but if I can make a gauge of estimate of age, when Vicky Landrum and Betty Cash were on the Unsolved Mysteries episode in 1990, they weren't young pups.
Oh no,
they were decently old. I'd say they had to have been pushing 60 some by then. You know, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
Low end, absolute low end 50s. But I would have probably have to guess 60s ish, right? So if Vicky Landrum lived until 2007 and she was around 60 ish in 1990, could we not argue that there's a possibility that her loss of sight was due to just her getting old?
Oh, you could. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But not to this story because they blame the radiation. They blame the effects of the object. So that's the first thing he brings up. Well, that's the first thing I bring up as well. Does age and genetics play a factor into any of this? Now, he also finds conflicting diagnosis for Betty Cash from another doctor who had actually diagnosed her with alopecia before the incident happened. So if you're unfamiliar
autoimmune related alopecia.
Oh, I didn't realize there was, I thought it was just alopecia. No. Okay. So if you're unfamiliar with what autoimmune alopecia is, it essentially makes your hair fall out.
Yes.
Right? But not just usually on your head. It's usually all over your body.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Patches just kind of go away until you're just, can we say naked? You're still wearing clothes,
Kind of.
obviously,
Well,
but you're
yeah.
naked of hair,
Yeah.
right? No mustache or anything like that. No armpit hair. I don't think any of that
No.
usually stays. So as the pictures, if you're watching the live feed now, the pictures that you see, her skin looks pretty wrinkly. Okay, I don't want to say that. So she looks kind of old already when the pictures were taken. And I say that because, like, with alopecia, like, is there any late onset alopecia?
I would, you know what though? I would be curious to see. Okay, let's just draw a line in the sand here.
Mhm.
What symptoms, if these symptoms were brought about by some autoimmune disorder, what were the known symptoms before the incident?
Yeah.
Like, give me a list of all their symptoms before.
Mhm.
Draw that line in the sand. Now let's look at their symptoms after this supposed event.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Uh,
And how quick was the onset?
That's true. But I think that has to also be calibrated against the average, how on average alopecia affects anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and another thing too is, granted, these women had a lot of health issues that were supposedly brought about from this radiation poisoning.
Varying types of cancer, the eye loss. I think Betty Cash eventually contracted cataracts in her eyes. So moving forward,
but I just want to say, what are, okay, fine. If they are each suffering from autoimmune or this, and they're both exhibiting symptoms of radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
What are the chances that two separate individuals are going to have the same symptoms without including in this incident?
That is true.
Do you see what I'm saying?
No, that is true. But
so that's just one thing to look at.
People who have alopecia also, I don't believe, blister up, do they?
No.
Because I've known two people to have alopecia.
I don't know any, because with me I have MCTD, mixed connective tissue disease.
Which is different from alopecia.
Which is, but it basically means that I collect autoimmune diseases. So like I have lupus, I have RA, I have scleroderma, and I'm just going to continue to get more autoimmune diseases. So, which is common when you have any type of autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
So it's really common. So that's what I'm saying here is that you have two separate people. What are the chances? And they're not related.
Mm-hmm.
To my knowledge, they were just friends, along with Vicky's grandson.
Yeah.
So what are the chances that both of these women, and they're from a small town in Texas. So, like they're not doing weird stuff.
Yeah.
They're not conducting science experiments, chemistry experiments in their backyard. What are the chances that each of these women would both experience the same symptoms that was not related to this UFO incident?
Well, I think this in particular, they did experience different ones, and that Brian Dunning with his conflicting diagnosis regarding the hair loss.
Yeah.
That Vicky Landrum and Colby Landrum didn't experience hair loss, but Betty Cash did.
Yeah.
So I think he was saying that was caused by alopecia. Because Vicky Landrum didn't have alopecia and she didn't lose her hair.
Yeah, but also she didn't get out and go.
That's true. So that's not a nail in a coffin. But that's a pretty big red flag that someone who has been diagnosed with the disease before an event happened actually exhibited something from that disease.
True, but even if we take the alopecia completely out of the equation, she is not going to come up with these blisters on her skin.
No, that's true.
From an autoimmune disease.
That's true. So let's move on to that. The blisters. She had blisters on her hands. And again, if you're watching this live stream, if you're not watching this live stream, you can actually find these pictures very easily if you do a Google search on Cash Landrum incident. These photos, I believe, were taken and used by the show That's Incredible. Sometime in the early 80s. The first picture that we have on the bottom left there shows an overhead shot of almost a perfectly centered abrasion, because it's in black and white. It's kind of fuzzy abrasion. Now, I believe that the picture all the way on the right is a picture of the same abrasion, which you could tell is raised up. And it doesn't even really look like a blister. It looks like a growth of some kind.
Yeah, it kind of does.
It doesn't look like a sunburn or anything like that. And I explicitly say sunburn because Brian Dunning cites also, I believe it's still from That's Incredible, there was a skeptical doctor who took a look at these pictures. And that doctor from that show actually thought that it was caused intentionally on herself by Betty Cash cutting circles in like a fabric and then exposing herself to sunlight.
Yeah, like laying it across your hand where only that circle is visible.
Yeah. Now my problem with that is, and again, I'm not a doctor, but But you remember, and you've had your own stories that you've told me, but it's so I could be a part of this and understand this. Do you remember that one time I went to the pool and I went for entirely too long without any sun lotion on, and I was burnt pretty bad.
Yeah.
Not hospitalization burnt, which my friend Tony was. I believe he went to the hospital. Remember that?
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah, but he was a redhead, so he just got burnt to a crisp.
Right.
And I was super red to the point that was when you whipped out the technique of the tea bath.
Tea bath.
So you take a box of Lipton tea and you string them all together and you throw them in.
Yeah, you get the water as warm as you can stand it.
Mm-hmm.
Dump the tea bags in there, let it brew for a minute or two, and then get in. And something about the tea takes out the sting in the burn.
Yeah.
I know that sounds crazy, but it works.
It works. Now, from that experience, though, me being burned pretty bad, not as much to require hospitalization, but being burned pretty bad looks in no way like that.
Yeah.
That does not look like that at all.
No.
And I was out in the sun all day and no protection.
Mm-hmm.
So in theory, if we're going to apply the same logic, my whole body should have looked like that.
Yeah.
And there's no way I look like that. Oh, so is someone stretching? We got dogs.
Oh, it's Petey wanting in, probably.
We got dogs scratching. So if you get the time, take a look at it. Trista says, in my opinion, there's no chance that it would be naturally happen to both women at the same time.
Right?
Not to mention the proof of extreme radiation.
Exactly.
Now, there are also other conflicting results of their radiation levels weren't any higher than any other person's. Now, again, we're solely looking at Dr. McClellan's diagnosis when we speak of this radiation poisoning. Now, at the same time, too, there is documentation that 3 weeks later, after Dr. McClellan initially had seen Betty Cash, that she was then treated for acute radiation poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine that the hospital, the facility as a whole, wouldn't allow that to happen without a proper diagnosis, because I would assume that having a treatment for something that you don't have probably isn't great for you.
Oh, no.
And something as bad as radiation poisoning, I don't know what the treatment is for that.
I don't know, but I imagine it wouldn't be anything fun.
No. So you probably see adverse effects if she didn't have that acute radiation poisoning.
And it really boggles my mind too, thinking, okay, if this wasn't an actual UFO encounter,
mm-hmm.
what else could have possibly where else could she possibly have gotten this radiation poisoning?
Yeah.
What could she have been around that would have delivered that much radiation to her? And I'm at a loss. Mm-hmm. I legit cannot think of anything.
There's not a real good reason for that.
No.
I mean, there's not a good solution. There's not much going on in East Texas.
Where is a Texas grandma gonna find, you know what I'm saying? If this was some type of story just manufactured to, maybe to cash in on, what they're trying to get out of the government for this money for being injured. If it was just something like that, I find it really hard, because remember too, this isn't like we have now, where you have the internet and you have access to you researching things easily at the
mm-hmm.
at the click of a mouse.
Yeah.
We're talking the early 80s,
mm-hmm.
Technology then, and her being a simple grandma in Texas. It just really makes me.
Yeah. And Trista goes on to say, doctors make mistakes too. Trust me, I know. And that's true. But that same logic could go against you, Trista, if you're trying to argue that this was a legitimate extraterrestrial case. Yes, doctors do make mistakes. So is Dr. McClellan mistaken for any reason or another? Even if it's not malicious, is he mistaken? Yeah,
like Trista said, exactly. They weren't nuclear scientists.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying.
No, but you could ascertain whether or not someone's radiation filled with
and then
a Geiger counter, which isn't a hard machine to operate.
Yeah, but then there's we got to bring in, like I was saying in the beginning here, apart from Betty Cash and Vicki Landrum and little Colby here, you also have 7 other people who saw this event take place.
I mean, you're ruining my timeline.
That just kind of ruins it.
Yeah, you're ruining my timeline.
See, that's why. All right, talk. No, not that. Shut up.
It's like perfectly.
Are you going to talk? Shut up.
You know perfectly what to say to ruin my segues. Anyway, Daryl asked, did the young boy have all the same symptoms? He had the same symptoms as Vicki Landrum did. So that would be nausea, the headaches, the vomiting and stuff like that, the dehydration, but it wouldn't go as far as what Betty Cash would experience.
Losing the hair.
Yeah, in this case, Betty Cash really got the shit out of the stick.
Yeah, she did.
Pardon my French. So we go on from there, and we talked about the holes in the material that that the doctor supposedly said that she used. Dunning would then go on to accuse Schuessler, the MUFON investigator, of cherry-picking evidence to support an extraterrestrial solution.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from what we read, what we've discussed so far is what I researched. To cherry pick, you could cherry pick, but if you go through and interview 10 people,
Mm-hmm.
or if you go through and interview 50 people within a 10-mile radius, I don't know that that's how many he actually interviewed, but if you interview 50 people and 10 of them say, yeah, we saw an object in the sky, what feasibly do you think the other 40 people are gonna say? No, we didn't see anything.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean they were standing outside looking up at the sky and no, there wasn't anything there. For one reason or another, they didn't notice anything in the sky. So why would you explicitly say that? I'm sure there was a report, and he probably kept names in like a ledger or a list saying whether or not someone had seen something, blah, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
But case in point, of the 10 people, 7 people had seen their military helicopters, and we see this a lot with UFO cases. A lot of these UFOs don't make any noises.
Mm-hmm.
And I can almost guarantee this one did with its shooting jets of fire.
Yeah.
It's going to make a noise. But let's just give it the benefit of the doubt that this fire was relatively quiet when it exited the vehicle. You still hear helicopters.
Mm-hmm.
You are on the north side of our town, right? Directly down Main Street. Oh, you're not really the north side. I lied. You used to live on the north street.
Yeah.
North side. When you lived on the north side of town, it was directly down Main Street, maybe 10 miles to our hospital, which has a landing pad on top for a life flight helicopter that would go between Findlay, Ohio and Toledo, Ohio. Every time it passed over, you could hear it.
Yeah.
And by the time it crossed your house, I would imagine it would be at the max altitude that they usually get, right?
Probably, yeah.
And I'm not sure of any type of regulations to cite here, but if this thing is 130 feet away from Betty Cash when she's witnessing it hovering over the road, it's close enough to the road that it's making scorch marks on the pavement, right? So it's feasibly not that far off the ground, making these helicopters who start approaching it not that far off the ground. So you would think of the 10-mile radius that Schuessler had interviewed these people, that people would have at least heard the helicopters.
Yeah.
Right? So for one reason or another, they didn't. So of those 10 people, 7 of them did. So why would you, if you're worried about the other 40 not saying that they've seen anything, why would you bring that as evidence?
Yeah.
Right? So I know that's a roundabout way to kind of say I don't believe that he was cherry picking when everything was documented. He would bring to you the entirety of the evidence, right?
Yeah.
Now, Dunning doesn't go into how he says Schuessler was cherry picking because you're going to provide the evidence that you found. Now, maybe he was insinuating that Schuessler does believe it was an extraterrestrial craft. Now, as a MUFON investigator, that's not your goal. Okay. Now, and this is kind of the fundamental problem in my eyes with MUFON. You generally join MUFON because you're interested in extraterrestrial sightings of UFOs, right? If I don't give a crap about it, I don't believe anything in it, I don't want to hang out with a bunch of UFO nerds who think it is.
True.
Right? So you're gonna attract people who already kind of believe in a field of investigation that you need to be unbiased. You need to take data and evidence the way it comes, not to service whatever agenda you have. And that was what was perfect about Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and I was trying to plan a small mini series for this in the future. I don't know if it's going to come to fruition or not. But Dr. J. Allen Hynek was hired, I believe, and this is lack of research, but it doesn't matter because it wasn't for today's podcast. Was it like
for Project Blue Book?
Was it Blue Book? But there was one before Blue Book.
Yeah.
That I think he was hired for
now. Yeah, to actually disprove,
to debunk.
Yeah, to debunk it.
To say
and he was initially a diehard UFOs are not real.
They're not real.
And that's how he went into it. But through his years of investigation and talking to people who had these supposed events, he ran into cases where, and a good portion of the cases he investigated, he could find legitimate reasons explanations. Yeah. But there was that, there were some that he couldn't.
Yeah.
And through doing that, and they just kept reappearing. So eventually it made him into a believer.
Yeah. But the point of the matter in this instance is that even after he became a believer, after case after case after case of it looking legitimately like it wasn't anything of what he could explain, he still came into every case trying to document data and seeing what the data told him. not what he wanted to achieve from the data.
Yeah.
So with Schuessler, maybe Dunning is alluding to the fact that Schuessler already believes in UFOs and he's trying to actually push that agenda.
And just,
But from all the evidence that we have is decently strong evidence that now we're in the portion of the podcast, I'm sorry, that we're going to try to add counterpoints to. So I understand, but then I don't understand. And then I also understand a separate whole thing where if you join an organization, usually you have an interest in it, and it's not usually the opposite. I don't go on a paranormal ghost hunting adventure if, like, I just don't believe it, unless probably someone talks me into it. Hey, Alex, we know that you don't believe in ghosts at all. Would you mind coming with us and being the
skeptic that we need?
Yeah. So I understand. I don't understand Dunning's accusation on this. One last thing. And this is kind of a big thing, okay? I don't mean to crush your dreams, Trista, but this last thing here, both Betty and Vicky fervently believe and tell within detail that these were military helicopters.
Yeah, they were adamant about that.
That they were not only military helicopters, but they were Air Force helicopters, okay? Now, we didn't say it before, but we'll say it now. They describe twin rotor helicopters like Chinooks, or I don't think it was quite a Black Hawk, but regardless, a twin rotor helicopter. Okay, they say they know that it's that it was Air Force's because they had literally seen United States Air Force printed on the sides of the helicopters. Now, coming up with someone who was in the military at the time, and this is Dunning's research, his interviewee had said that the only problem with that is the U.S. Air Force did not own any twin rotor helicopters at the time. Our military did have them, but only in that area was the National Guard, and the Navy had twin rotor helicopters.
I thought it was the Army.
I'm sorry, Army.
Yeah,
Army. National Guard and Army, but the U.S. Air Force did not. On top of that, any insignia that goes on a U.S. Air Force helicopter is printed in small black type, which Dunning firmly believes that they would not be able to see. Now, I wanted to actually physically go outside in the dark and test this, actually bring out 130 feet, and it was going to be a little bit here, a little bit there, because I believe the object started raising when the helicopters came over, so it's going to be a little more than 130 feet. Plus, they were moving, but then they also encircled it as well, encircled the object, to see if I could actually make out something like that. I'm not sure how the experiment would work for me to properly test that, but the only real way that you would have been able to tell for sure at that distance at that time of day would have been to see the Air Force insignia, which no one made mention of. Okay, so that is almost one of the biggest damning arguments. Now, to backtrack again, to play double agent, the was it L.L. Walker, the detective who had also seen the military helicopters? He was also convinced that it was military, but he doesn't go into exactly what he had seen to make him think that it was military.
Yeah.
So whether or not they were military or they weren't, whether or not Betty and Vicky were fervently believing that it was U.S. Air Force or not, that's still very murky. On top of that, cherry on top.
In my opinion, though, that withstanding, if that's like the only thing that is kind of, about this case, maybe they were mistaken about that. They were in a situation, a high anxiety situation. So maybe it was that they just didn't read it right. I don't know. I don't know.
And you know what? In many other cases, we would write this off as a small
discrepancy.
A small discrepancy. But apparently it was a big thing to both Vicky and Betty that no, this was a U.S. Air Force helicopter.
Yeah.
And you know that for sure because they went to Bergstrom Air Force Base to complain. They filed a lawsuit for $20 million later against the Air Force and not the federal government and not any other branch of the military. So also Colby, and this was a short little addendum to that. Colby, while in an interview, would okay, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. The interviewers would ask Vicky and Betty to draw a picture of any of the identifying factors on the helicopter, and they would start drawing and explaining what they had seen and what they had read. And Colby would perk up and say, "Oh, do you mean the helicopter that landed in Dayton?" To which they quickly shushed him.
Yeah.
So is there Daryl chimes in, Chinooks for troop transport?
I thought it would be Huey's when I glanced up and I was looking at the picture.
I don't know why they would send those. Would have been more likely Huey's.
Huey's, yeah.
And that's true for all of you who didn't understand that. The Chinooks, the twin rotor Chinooks, were those big badass helicopters they had, I believe, at least starting in Vietnam, correct? With the Chinooks, and they were troop transports. They looked like just basically flying tanks. Weren't really meant for combat; they were meant for transport. So why would you send a troop transport helicopter to investigate an unidentified object? Which is a good question. And I thought about that too.
Picking up something.
Someone. They did have their spotlights on. So if these helicopters are going above these trees, running their spotlights across the ground, but then your target is in the air, why would you need your spotlights on the ground? Sense. Unless they were just like, and this is just reaching here. Let's just say they let them dangle on their mounts. They're just kind of hanging. You know what I'm talking about? Just like,
wow.
Jim, get on the freaking light, Jim. Jim's all cranked.
Poor Jim. Bye, Jim.
I don't know. So if you're trying to ascertain whether or not a target in the sky is a bogey or not, why would you have a spotlight on the ground? That's true. So that also is another discrepancy that I thought about. Thank you for reminding me, Daryl. Between that, so also with Colby piping up and being quickly shushed about the quote helicopter that landed in Dayton, did they see another aircraft? Like at an air show, or maybe driving by and they happen to see it land in Dayton and they kind of applied it to this. It's making it sound really weird.
Yeah.
That they would have just enough knowledge of something to be able to apply it to a situation to even allow them in the Air Force Base for an interview, and then not technically be correct in what it could have been. So all of that aside is giving the government and the military full trust in what they were saying. No, there weren't any military things going on in the area. Why? No, we don't have any record. Paper shuffle. Nope,
liars.
Nothing, right? And then, the government wouldn't cover anything up. So all of that still feels a bit odd that if we're going to take it at face value, right? We have multiple witnesses besides the main three. Okay. Now one could automatically just deduct a lot of credibility now that we have a lawsuit for $20 million. And we had talked about this before we started recording. $20 million in 1980?
That's a lot of money.
For pain and suffering? I wouldn't doubt 85% of businesses in the United States are worth $20 million at the time. But yeah, these ladies want $20 million for their hospital stay and pain and suffering.
Yeah, that does seem rather extreme.
A little bit. So maybe they were trying to overshoot in lieu of, or in hopes of maybe a bargain. So not 20, but they're going to set their bar high.
Give you 10.
Oh, fine.
Sold American.
Yeah, sold American. So, but a lot of people would automatically deduct a lot of merit from them, knowing that they tried to gain financially from it, because $20 million is not only paying your medical bills, it's going to be paying your family members for like 3 generations if you play your cards right, 4 generations, 5 generations.
You could buy an island with $20 million.
If you invest it right, you're now in Forbes.
I'm going to buy me an island and I'm going to go live there, because stuff like this does not happen on islands.
Yeah. Trista just had a very long comment about a UFO that they had witnessed at a fireworks show. Trista, pardon us for not reading that on air. We do hope to have write-ins for some shows in the future, and you already know that, so keep that on the back burner for us. I don't want to read the whole thing, because then that just ruins content for us. So put it in the bank. Put it in the bank. Send it. Put it in the bank.
Put it in the bank.
So after conflicting diagnosis, issues with placing the current hardware with the correct hardware with the correct organization, and the attempt at financial benefit, we're still left with some evidence that cannot be denied. Again, multiple witnesses passed who the people were that were trying to financially benefit, the principal witnesses, as well as the pictures taken of the scorched pavement that were later dug up and replaced. So whether or not you actually trust what the military was saying at the moment, and you know what, I keep going back. I don't know if I've gone back with this podcast, but I use it in a natural setting when I'm just going on diatribes without a microphone in front of my face. But like the Bikini Bay experiment. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah.
There was a movie called Atomic Cafe that I think kind of delves into that. Essentially, it was the atomic testing, I believe, was it Los Alamos? In the American Southwest.
Yeah.
If you're not from the United States, in the American Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico area, it's where we initially started testing nuclear bombs. Excuse me. And what they would do is they would ask for volunteers from the military, and they would set them like 5-10 miles out from the epicenter of a nuclear blast. And you would have like this, the series of light training before they had done this. And it was kind of funny if you ever watched that movie again. It's called Atomic Cafe. think it was in that one. They would go through these like little mini seminars where they would tell you, oh, you got to keep your glasses on because it'll burn your eyes.
Yeah.
And then they would have these like little anatomical drawings on flip boards they would go through. They had to make sure that you checked your body for cuts and abrasions. And if you had any, you couldn't be part of the experiment because the way that the radiation hurts you is by getting into your skin. But your skin cannot be penetrated by radiation unless you have a cut or an abrasion. So out of everything, that is one small example. And if you want to get into all the other examples of how the government has misled the American people, I am not trying to get on an anti-American thing, especially not on Memorial Day. I'm not going to do it. But it has been done before. Tests where they didn't know what was going to happen in order to kind of see the effects of this stuff. They have misled people. So is this another case of just them misleading on testing an object? Are we not talking about something extraterrestrial at all? Are we talking about something ancillary extraterrestrial? Were we testing out something that we, technology we had gained from something else from extraterrestrials? Regardless, it's an odd thing that has not come into the public eye since. The SR-22 was known to the American government and not known to the American people for a number of years before the government said, yep, this is it. This is a badass airplane that we came up with. We've been testing it for a while. We just didn't tell you for top secret security reasons. And it's understandable. We understand that, especially during the Cold War. Can't let that out. We were being just pummeled to death with the MiG. But hey, we got the SR-22 out of it, and that came about. We still don't have, to my knowledge, any vehicles that are oriented vertically that don't have propellers that shoot flames out of the bottom.
Not that I know of.
So now we're in this murky medium of it being kind of alien extraterrestrial technology, but still using fire, some type of propulsion system that isn't just a the entire time, right? So we're in the middle. So is it something that we were just trying to devise or whatever? If that's the case, Betty Cash kind of does have a lawsuit, should have a lawsuit in her hands. If they were testing something and they weren't supposed to be testing it there and she got radiation poisoning from something that should not have been in a populated area, yeah, she does.
But again, that would never be admitted.
No, it wouldn't. And I don't think it would be admitted any sooner than if it were an extraterrestrial craft, which the government would kind of have the hand up on. It wasn't us. It wasn't our craft.
Well, I think either way, you'd really be kind of screwed.
And she was.
We're not going to admit it. We're not going to admit it's extraterrestrial related, and we're also not going to admit that it might have been something of ours.
Yeah.
So either way,
Yeah, either way, she was screwed. She passed away with no real help from any government facility whatsoever. And
it's very sad.
And that is kind of how the story wraps up for us today. I believe you were actually telling me afterward that maybe Colby had done some interviews afterwards because he's still alive.
Oh yeah. He's I'm trying to think. He's probably close to my age.
Really?
So around about.
If he was 7 in 1980, 50. I mean.
Yeah. So he's probably around late 40s.
Yeah. I didn't come upon any of those interviews when I was doing research.
I can't remember. I know I saw it on YouTube, but I can't remember what show he was on.
Interesting. Okay.
Talking about it.
Yeah.
So, but I will look that up tonight and I'll post that on the page on our Supernatural Tendencies podcast page.
Yeah, sounds good.
On Facebook.
All right. I think that wraps it up for today. And this
great case.
Pretty awesome case. I mean, I like having the duality. I like having the ins and outs, and Skeptoid with Brian Dunning really provided that for us.
Yeah.
Although, and this is not me being having an interest in the paranormal, because you have other witnesses as well. Even if Schuessler went through and cherry picked all the best information, to me, doesn't matter, because if you have the 3 principal witnesses give you their story, and then you have a number of other people say, yeah, we saw something too, and then you have a cop on top of that saying, I also saw the helicopters. They're not lying about at least the vast portion, the main core of the story.
Yep.
What happened? Something happened. And now the government wants to be shady about what exactly happened. Now, we can sit here all day and kind of go through the possibilities of why they were being shady, but they were. And whenever somebody is shady, there's going to be stories, and there's going to be...
It calls into question why.
Yeah.
So we have to ask that.
So if you guys want to do some extra research on your own, digging in a little deeper than I did, obviously there's something that I missed. I try not to do that, but I did. So thank you, Trista, for saying it was a great show. It was okay. It was rather late compared to our usual of near noon. You're welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us. Do you have anything you want to add to the end of today's?
No, I think that's it for today's show.
I think it was a pretty good show.
Awesome story.
Yep. I do have a couple things I wanted to shout out as well. I always try to shout out podcasts when I listen to them because that's all I do all week. Again, check out the Kryptonaut podcast. If you guys listen to any type of podcast at all, they do alien abductions. They do cryptids and stuff like that. If you haven't at least tried the Kryptonaut podcast, do it. I honestly, some days them and last podcast on the left, American Hauntings podcast make me not even want to do this anymore. And it's not because of lack of interest. It's because if these podcasts do this so well, what can I do to do any better, come even close to what they do? So if you get the interest, I believe Kryptonaut Podcast is running a special on their TeePublic for their merchandise. You can get their merchandise at any time on TeePublic. They encourage you to wait till sales happen, especially with this pandemic. TeePublic actually approached them to have a sale on some of their designs for their shirts, that their cut of each sale, the Kryptonaut podcast cut, would actually go to the local Meals on Wheels for them, which is out of Auburn, New York. This week I tried finding it before I came over. I couldn't find it because I put it in the wash and I have no idea where it's hung. But I was going to wear my shirt that I had bought that actually helped benefit that. So if you guys get the time and you have the extra cash to throw to it, they have great designs. On top of that, it's going to a great cause. I think they have 2 different designs going towards Meals on Wheels.
Oh, cool.
For the Auburn senior citizens over there in New York. Get a chance to hop on. If not, still give them a listen. Rob Morphy has done cryptid research and alien research since like the dawn of the freaking internet. So he is very knowledgeable, and they do just absolutely great shows. I believe that it's a little bit of explicit content, so if you have kids, don't let them
watch
in
it
the
after
room.
the kids go to bed.
Yep, and then also, and then also, I just kind of set them the American Hauntings podcast by Troy Taylor. Again, some of the benefits that these other podcasts have, they have actual names behind what they do. They have experience. With the American Hauntings podcast, they do have Troy Taylor. He's been doing stuff, since the late 80s, early 90s, writing books. He's been on a bunch of TV shows. You can go on American Hauntings tours all over the United States. I think they have some in New Orleans. They have some in Alton, Illinois. So you can actually join in on that. They do the Haunted America Conference, which I was hoping to attend this year, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen or not with all this stuff going on. So if you get a chance, check out American Hauntings. Perfect blend of history and spookiness in there, and that's totally what I'm into. Given the whole wrap, and that what they do is they actually do per season. We don't do seasons here. We just kind of do it over and over and over, whatever throughout the year. But they actually do seasons where they'll do a bunch of research and record the seasons and then kind of release them week by week, but they're already done. Yeah. Right. And they do a city per season, basically. I think their first one they did Alton. I think they might have done St. Louis after that. They went on to Kansas with the Kansas axe murders. Kansas ass murders. And then this newest season is New Orleans. So the entirety of the season is going to be New Orleans history, New Orleans cool. Spook areas and stuff like that. So if that piques your interest, please check those people out. They do fantastic work. Other than that, I think we're done.
You have
anybody else you want to shout out? Kimbo, thanks for coming. Which is funny because every time I think about going live, I think about Kimbo. I'm sorry, Trista. I'm sorry, Jennifer. But Kimbo, for some reason, I'm like, is Kimbo going to be here?
I hope Kimbo.
That's fantastic. Guys, every time pops up. Yeah.
No, I think I'm good on this one.
All right. If we missed anybody, I know we had that long-standing thing of you invited a bunch of people to the group.
You get a shout out.
We haven't had many people. I think we have 3 people today join, but they were just people who happened upon. So if you guys get the time, you want to invite some people to the group, we'll give you a shout out. Of course, we will. Of course. We're thinking about starting up a TeePublic of our own. So that's not established at all. We're just kind of looking into the logistics of it. So if you guys would like some shirts, we got to come up with some designs. We already have a couple, but I know that, like I said, the Kryptonaut podcast, they come up with like a new design every week because all you do is send them their design and you buy it from there. They ship it and everything else. So we'll see how that pans out. But I'd say that's probably about it.
That's it.
Audio listeners, thank you for listening. Stick around for the Musician Spotlight. For everybody in the live, hopefully you listen every Tuesday. You are missing the actual scripted narrative that gives a more concise feel to this story. Also, you're missing on the Musician Spotlight. Please stick around for the Musician Spotlight. As for that, I'm out of breath and I'm out of time. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Love you.